Thank you very much. I'm excited to be back at CitA. I was there 9 years ago, speaking about a journey, actually. And we're measuring our industry in decades now. And I want to talk about the 3 decades experience that I've had and observations from that relating to digital twins and AI, augmented intelligence, artificial intelligence, and brains and bytes. So I'm an architect. I am in California, based in California. I'm in Tokyo for a couple of days. But we started over 30 years ago looking at data relating to design and construction. We've always been interested in the data because we were communicating requirements, and I saw the opportunity of linking data to graphics. We got into BIM in the early 90s, first with ArchiCAD, and then with all the other tools. We're using Revit as well, too. And then we went from there, and we found that a lot of the clients that we were working with had big visions about the entire portfolio. For the Coast Guard, for example, a very large number of buildings. And we saw the need to build our own application. So we built our own application called the Onuma system, a BIM server in 2004, actually. So we're 20 years, cloud native, cloud first for 20 years. Being in the cloud, immediately we saw opportunities of linking to other things in the cloud. And we've been waiting for 30 years for AI to get ready to plug into all this. So it's pretty exciting. We also have a tool called BIM Genie that goes into the life cycle. That was a tool that our clients asked us to build because they were frustrated with legacy kind of standalone apps that weren't as connected. So with all that knowledge, we collected data along the way that is useful for design, construction, decision making, but also can be plugged into AI. And we've all seen these movies. At the same time, it's fascinating and also terrifying. A lot of them are coming true in many ways, and it's moving so fast that I think we need to be ahead of it. We don't want to go towards what is called the Hollywood BIM. We've probably heard that term before, where we have this kind of glitzy, pretty picture stuff, which is incredibly important. But if we get drawn to that only, it's the same thing with AI. What's the practical side of this? And I think it's the I of BIM and the I of AI. And the I, obviously, it's information. I think it's intelligence, knowledge, and data. And how do we use it? Our industry is packed with information and knowledge. That's what we're trained at. We're trained at connecting the dots and understanding the complexities of how systems and buildings go together. So we're perfectly positioned to actually utilize all these tools, even hand sketches. So this is from 2004. I sketched this on a plane, actually, on the way to a meeting with the U.S. Coast Guard Homeland Security to explain to them in their BIM roadmap how information and data can be attached at any level of detail. It could just be a block on a map. Then as you start building up the geometry, the data can start increasing. But on the opposite side, you can have a very simple block packed with all the data with no geometry. So it's not one or the other, it's both. And we're naturally kind of drawn toward the complexity of it all. And so in 2004, when we did this, we actually created what we called BIM level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5 even. It's basically like a level of development, level of information. I think we were early on in identifying that and communicating that to the client, because a lot of this doesn't even have to do with the technology. It's about how you tell the story. The storytelling is so important because the complexity of it all. It's very easy to write volumes and volumes about this, but how do you boil it down to what is this all about? How do you get to the information and make decisions with it to the many different stakeholders? And then I looked at the 2008 Bew Richards diagram, and I think this is great. It was a great rallying view of all this information, categorizing it. But then I wanted to take it a step further, and I looked at this and I said, okay, you have level 0 is CAD, say. This is directly from the diagram. 2D, 3D, level 1, level 2, you start getting BIM with objects. And then level 3 was about the data, lifecycle management, and processes. But I think data happens at every level. And I know that the intent of the diagram was not to say it only happens at level 3, but it's confusing to a lot of people when they see this first. So I'm saying you really want to cross-cut all this. You cross-cut it with data. Data can happen with zero geometry, for that matter. It could be a dot on the map with all the information about a building, the people in the building, the square foot, all that stuff. It could just be a dot on a Google map, and you go from there. And it's not one or the other. It's definitely both. And processes, the business processes and decisions are critical for AI and for humans. So I think that's critical throughout all these phases. So if we look at this and say, okay, we have all these pieces here. These are great pieces. I'm going to treat them as Legos. And if we pivot this and say data is actually underneath all of it, it's underneath all of it. And typically applications have data fused to them. They're bound to that application. What app do I need to get to see work orders? I need to go open up the work order app. What app do I need to go and see the space inventory? I need to have the 2D plan or the space inventory database. What apps do we need to do engineering and architecture? Okay, we need IFC and open exchanges to communicate with COBE from BIM into CMS applications. These are all file exchanges, which were a very important piece to being able to communicate with an open standard format. But if we decouple the data, and when I say decouple, I mean there's two ways of doing it. One, you can just have an API to let others access that information. Or the other is to actually have a shared database or many databases with a web service. So it's not a single database. That's another important piece. There are a lot of diagrams that kind of have one thing in the middle and we're all tapping into one thing. Well, conceptually, yes, but absolutely not in a digital twin. So if you have this kind of architecture, and we didn't invent this architecture, this is how the internet runs. You have open data services that can be used by any app, and you can build new apps on top of that. It has to be cloud native, cloud first to be able to use it any way you want. And then you have future apps that we don't even imagine now that need to be plugged into this. And AI just loves this. It could just gobble this up because the structure there, it reduces the hallucinations. I think if we start training it with the knowledge that we have, and you start building agents and say, well, go look across this and do things with it. So this has been coming up over the years of organizing all this for humans and our previous tools to use, but also for AI. And we've used this over and over again. I'll go into some use cases. So I'm in California, and I posted a blog post about the Hotel California, where you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And I had said this data is kind of the same way. If you don't treat data in a format that you can leave, you want to be able to leave your app, your application, and move it to something else. We all want that with our normal apps on our phone even, right? But with our building industry, we need to think in that same way. And I've been an advocate for that. Even though we have our own application, we treat it in a way that, okay, you can take the data out, you can API it, and everybody that's an owner needs to be asking that question when they make a decision about what infrastructure to use. So case study, California Community College is using those Lego blocks that I just described. This is the largest community college district in the world, 5,000 buildings, 72 districts spread out throughout California. They had a database for space inventory called Fusion. We could have imported their space inventory into our app and said, thank you very much. Let's use that now to do planning and work orders and whatever. But we said, no, let's help you build an API, that decoupling with an API with a web service, so we can plug into your data and pull it into a dot on a map, or a building on a site, or a room on a floor plan, or a BIM if there's a BIM, or a CAD if there's a CAD, or a PDF or whatever, or an asset. This is the only way that we've seen it possible to scale. Otherwise, you're constantly doing extractions and transforming and loading into different systems and trying to synchronize it, and then it's never in sync. Imagine if you had to do that with the Uber app. Uber, you just push a button and it brings a car to you, and you don't have to worry about the satellite or the engine, and the data just flows. The financials happen, all that stuff. So the technology has been there for years. We're just transitioning. I think our industry, it's going to be a transition, right? But this has been a case study that has been working very well for us for this community college. And Los Angeles district is the biggest one within the state of California, with 742 buildings. Same thing there. And this is our app now linked to that inventory and adding other information to it and being able to on the web kind of do planning and maintenance over time like an IWMS system. So architecture that I mentioned, the same Lego blocks. Fusion data on the bottom, the state owns that. Other data at the district level, the district owns that, Los Angeles. The APIs allow things to talk to each other. We have a BIM server, so we plugged in our BIM app on top of that, and then a whole bunch of other apps along the top, whether they're custodial or CMS, or and I'll talk about TADDI in a second. It basically lets you plug any Lego, as long as that Lego piece works with each other. So back to the end user, the story. The story is so important because as the complexity of AI and digital twins comes into play, if we can't tell the story correctly and get that app in a format that that end user can interact with, it's meaningless. If they can need a month of training or even a week of training, who wants to spend a week learning how to use an Uber app? You basically push a button and you go. So if you break it down into pieces like that, it means you can build apps on the fly. And apps should be disposable. You should be able to throw that app away and say, I want a different app. I don't like Uber, I'm going to use Lyft, or I don't like this map, I'm going to use another map. It's basically that kind of flow with our facility data and AI plugged into that as well, which I'll get into next. So this is a problem with one of the Hollywood BIM problems that I mentioned earlier. Los Angeles in 2011 they had some amazing BIM models, very detailed. You can fly through them, pull open the ceiling, look at equipment. And I told them, that looks great, but how are you going to scale it to 700 buildings? If you have 5 buildings like that, and then how do you maintain it? And they were planning on connecting it to a CMMS. This was 2011. 2023, years later, it never happened. They brought us in within a month. We had the first version running, and then 2 months later, boom, it took off with almost zero training especially for the users that were in the field. Here's an app, tell us what's going on in the building, hit the submit button and go, and it ties into the whole other rest of the infrastructure, which means it's feeding a lot of data from users in the building of things happening. Air conditioner is not working, the floor is leaking, there's a leak in the ceiling, the window's broken, all that. I'm very upset about this, building that's very old. So we took that and we did some tests with it. This was over a year and a half ago, actually. We started using AI to test what can it do. And we did things like give us a sentiment analysis. How are people feeling about the building? And throughout those millions of data points, basically, you can start narrowing it down and creating kind of a conversation. You're starting to have a conversation with your building. And this was kind of an eye-opener for us because we knew the data was there and we knew that this is possible. And then we've evolved past this now. It's just kind of an early prototype. And you can do things like create charts and all kinds of stuff to come out of it. Some things don't even make sense to use AI. That's another important point. Just because AI can do it doesn't mean we're going to feed everything through AI. There's a lot of other things, with analysis and machine learning and all that. So it depends on the use case of how you're going to do that. But it does give you patterns and connecting the dots that are not easily connected to give you and be able to make informed decisions for your building. We also did a test of taking our BIM-Genie CMMS application has preventive maintenance built in to it. So there's a lot of stuff about preventive maintenance. But what if we feed some of those procedures through AI and ask it to create a training manual, including the diagrams, to see what it does? And it can actually pull the preventive maintenance procedure apart, created them. This is within minutes, right? Some of the diagrams are a little bit weird. This is maybe almost a year ago now, but it's getting better so fast that it's kind of scary at times, right? How fast this stuff is moving. But this is where it's going. It's to automate things that are mundane and be able to look across the portfolio at many different systems. The definition of a digital twin is a system of systems. It's not one system. Digital twin is not one thing. It's many systems talking to each other, just like the internet is not one page or it's not only Google, all that kind of stuff. So think in terms of our infrastructure and our buildings feeding into that. And we have a wealth of information from buildings, which would be useful. And by linking them together, you can start querying and having that conversation either through AI or either directly with the data. I was the lead on the data framework working group for the digital twins for the built environment position paper just put out by the National Institute of Building Sciences. You can download it here. We put some early positions in about what digital twins are. And I made the recommendation actually early on a year and a half ago to put AI into it. There was some resistance. People are kind of, well, AI, it hallucinates. No, we got to put it in there and start talking about it and figure it out because it plugs into it. AI is a subset of a digital twin, and the Digital Twin Consortium definitions, it's like that too. It's one tool within all the toolkits that are needed. So another use case, through the National Institute of Building Sciences, we've gone through a whole series of projects over the last 15 years. This one is with the US State Department for their embassies worldwide. They wanted to digitize everything, use BIM, look at the life cycle. They have a manual that's like 5,000 pages long in PDF format of their space standards, and 2,000 of them are diagrams and whatever. And we said, this is crazy. Let's take this PDF, turn it into a database, very simple database, components, spaces, positions, and there's a lot more to it. From that, you can drive it into BIM. So you start with data, drive it into the requirements, feed it into the architects to deliver it back, and then check that data. So once you have data to data, obviously you can start doing all kinds of checking, and then you lay the framework for other tools to use that standard. Over the years as an architect, I've been pretty frustrated at my colleagues that have not seen the vision of what BIM and all. It's been very slow, but I've decided to go towards the owners, because when the owners start talking, obviously that's the client, and the industry can change. And that's why I'm also drawn to the Los Angeles district and community colleges there, because there's a large owner that can actually make change to the industry. So with the State Department, and this is public data, we presented this before, but just a few slides. There's a lot happening in the background that I can't share, but I can share that they're looking at data as an asset. They're looking at establishing authoritative sources and looking at having access to many different types of users from many different angles and simplifying it, doing more with less and all that. So it's not just one user group, it's shared across. And AI is part of that too, obviously. It's the same argument here. If you plug in, it's just another agent or another user here that would want to get access to that kind of information. Over the years, about 16 years now, I think, we started BIMstorm as a workshop to test these things out. Because we don't get clients that come in with contracts and say, hey, we want to use AI to design a building. It's kind of, you have to start that testing early on. So even with BIM, we've had these, and if you go to bimstorm.com, you can actually join in. We've had these AI sessions over the last almost 2 years now. We started this journey to test things out. And then we take what we learned here and then we implement, or we find other solutions or other partners or vendors that have interesting tools that can be plugged in as well. It's those Legos. We just want to plug things in and start working with them. The first one for the AI was American Institute of Architects in Japan. We call it AIA. And these are some of the outputs we had in a few days. Actually, we said, okay, what if we have a conversation with the program requirement? So some of this is our tool in here, but we plugged in AI and said, start having a conversation. We want to design a hospital or an apartment building. Okay, start spitting data into it, get data out. That data feeds into our application and then starts building the spaces with the right components. And this is what I was talking about with the State Department earlier. It's the same strategy. We need to have kind of standardized spaces. Those can still morph and change, but you have kind of the building blocks that can be adjusted with data. And then you need along the way to have designers and architects have a conversation with that data and then use it to design. So more and more of this is getting automated, but it's not just a push button all the way to the end. But this was happening in a few days where we generated a lot of buildings, even imagery from the outside to match what was going on inside, and then took the actual data into BIM, into Revit in this case, and took it all the way into simulating construction and going into operations with that data. Facility management with BIM Genie, and we did this it was like a 1 month exercise with many different workshops with teams around the world. And it's still ongoing. One of the teams was called the Interoperable Building Box. I have the link down there. There's weekly meetings on this. And this group, they have a huge experience in the industry for automation systems and sensors. And they've been frustrated with closed systems. So they're building a way to standardize APIs, kind of like an open source API. If you have an API that says you want a piece of equipment talking to the building, you don't have to build it 1,000 different ways. You build it one way, get agreement, and then you use it. They also present this concept of silos. Obviously, we all know about these silos that they're hard to get into, but the important point here is you don't need to know the whole silo. We're not trying to merge all these silos into one big silo, one big cylinder, right? We just need certain touch points. Those blue lines across the top is, we want a little bit of information from energy and a little bit of information from CMS and a little bit of information from lights, put it into BIM and do something with it. And those are the interoperable building blocks. So you end up with interoperable silos. Silos are actually good in this scenario because they're focused on that use case. They're bad if you can't get into them, but as soon as you create the connections, they could be very valuable. In other words, you don't have to solve the whole stack. Keep it simple, get it going. Cloud first, cloud native, open interfaces. And here's an example of a connection profile that says, how do we connect one system to the next? You capture that rule, and then you use it over and over again. And PADI is one of the tools that Onuma has connected to with these connection profiles. And this is a digital twin, basically. These lines are the connections. The lines are actually apps. You can build an app within seconds. Once you have a connection profile and you have a BIM and you have a sensor, you say, well, I want these two connected and I want an app to see it on my phone. It's like a pull apps together, and it's completely open so others can build on top of it. I have some views of that PADI app all the way into the CMS application, views into the floor plan that's coming from Onuma in this case. And these floor plans are actually generated from data. They're not just graphics or output as monolithic files. It's actually the data. So as the floor plans change, it updates in each view and does color coding based on sensors and keeps going. So anyway, that's my last slide. But overview, we're all used to using our mobile devices. That's driving everything, I think, and we're expecting simplicity of this complex world of everything being interconnected as digital twins. And it's just pretty exciting if we're in that space to be able to start solving these problems. But it's going to take collaboration with competitors, with different tools, with different owners. And let's not wait another 30 years to figure this out, because this is moving faster than us, I think. And AI being part of that now is pretty interesting, because we are already doing things like building agents and giving them tasks along that line of what we're doing, saying, here, get these 3 agents together and start doing things with this data. And yeah, all driven from the experience in the building industry, and excited to share this with you guys. And join us in the BIM storm. That's where you can learn more about this and bring your solutions in there, and let's plug things together and make it work.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, did we lose him? Has he gone? Okay.
I'm here.
Sorry. Given that it's late for you, I was wondering, would you like to take questions now, or would you like to join the panel at the end?
I kind of prefer now if there are questions, if you have time.
Yeah, brilliant.
But it's up to you.
No, that works. That works for us. So who has a question? Anybody? I think everybody's digesting what you just said. It's super exciting. Really, really exciting. No? Anybody? I mean, I asked this question earlier on. In terms of like a lot of data you're dealing with there, how do you approach the challenge of data sovereignty when with your customers, in where that data is sitting and who, data sovereignty?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, with every client that we work with, in fact, the government clients we're working with, that's always a big deal, right? But if you build it the way that simplified architecture, that kind of show a version of that, you can identify who the source was, right? So you don't want, and you can tag other things to it. So there's a way of tracing it back if it's built correctly, obviously. The other way around is if you had to export it from one system and import it to the next, then you have two things and say, where did this come from, who owns it, and who governs it, and all that kind of stuff. So I strongly believe this is absolutely the only way to do it. And I'm not saying my way, I'm saying the industry's way of how the internet already works, and you look at blockchain and all that too, how you can trace things. And so there's a lot of technology out there that'll help us solve that, but the only way to actually figure that out is to start testing. That's another big deal for us, is we can't keep talking about it forever. The fastest way to get there is to use an agile approach and just start building. Okay, how do we solve this particular use case for sovereignty, data sovereignty, and get the players in there and actually start doing kind of like it's a hackathon. This is what Brainstorm is. We just basically start things out, and it turns into actual products in the end, whether for us or for others.
Oh, brilliant. And then another question I asked earlier on, I'll ask you the same one. So given the audience here is predominantly AEC companies, and you've given us really good examples in the operations and, using BIM process, etc. If people are starting off, what would be your strong piece of advice, the first stepping stone to get going with AI in this industry?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned this before, but I think we each have a lot of knowledge and understanding of the industry that we use for our projects. And thinking in terms of, obviously you don't want to give everything away. You don't, that's actually another thing too. You don't, it's not a free for all where everybody gets everything, right? You can actually control that. So what you're selling is your knowledge and ability to tell the story and connect the dots and build a building or renovate or whatever, or plan a campus. All of that information is valuable, and think in terms of just creating something, even a simple table. I mean, we use Google Suites quite a bit. In fact, Google Sheets is amazing. You can start connecting. It's almost like a database, but just start collecting the rules. That's what we told the state department, right? When they had PDFs. So here's 2,000 pages of PDFs. We'll take it out of that PDF. Let's create a list of spaces, because the page 5 and page 500 don't match. The name doesn't match because they were done different years. Or the number of that piece of equipment is different, because it's impossible to manage it in a Microsoft Word document, which is essentially a lot of places are doing, right? So turn it into some kind of a database, and then start testing. Even just using these simple tools like ChatGPT, you can do quite a bit with it. And there's some new ones out there as well too, Notebook and whatever. Start testing with your own data. Learn what it can do, and then learn how you can transform what you already have, whether it's in people's heads or in documents that you have, into something that's valuable as a data as an asset, essentially, for your organization.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. The floor, any questions? All right, we will let you get to your bed. Thank you so much. Thank you, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.